Hello and welcome aboard another episode of the Gallant Says podcast. It is Monday, January 29th of 2024. I'm going to talk about why, if you are somebody who prefers CJ Stroud to Lamar Jackson, Sunday is perfectly acceptable evidence to use in court. I'm going to talk about the border, getting kicked out of a bar in Austin, but I want to talk about the AFC Championship game really quickly first. I hate to compare the Chiefs to the Patriots, but I have to. Take a look at the numbers for Patrick Mahomes, whose Kansas City Chiefs are advancing to yet another Super Bowl. 14-3 overall, 13-1 in regulation, 2-0 on the road, 3-0 as an underdog, and the all-time leader in passing yards per game, passer rating, completion percentage, and touchdown to interception ratio. That's courtesy of my friend Nick Wright. First things first on Fox Sports. How can you not compare the Chiefs to the Patriots, even if you are at times, militant homer for that organization? Mahomes is awesome, and the team is well coached, and I don't know why there were as many people who were doubting KC going into that game. I mean, the line shifted from 3.5 to 4.5 in the days leading up to the game. And maybe that had to do with Joe Thuney being out or some of the other issues that they were dealing with. But to go from there to that, when we're talking about Patrick Mahomes, who was not getting old, who was not showing signs of decline, when we have learned this lesson with an older version of Tom Brady, I don't know where we're going to learn it. The reason I feel comfortable making a comparison between the Patriots and Kansas City, it feels like the other team eventually pissing down their leg, crapping their pants, puking all over themselves. It almost always feel like that team and its self-inflicted demise is inevitable. And on the other side of things, Kansas City mistakes are few and far between, unless it's Kadarius Toney, who didn't play in this game, or unless it's D Ford lining off sides. Really, that's the last time I can remember Kansas City doing something catastrophic to itself in a playoff game. And sure, there have been games where they didn't play well. The game against the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow, the Super Bowl where Mahomes was running for his life, and that D Ford offsides. But I mean, they've won every other game that they've played in these playoffs, and you just are expecting the other team to screw up at some point. And that's what happened again on Sunday. And it does make you wonder what it's going to take for somebody to overtake Kansas City when New England had their first dynasty in 2001, 2003, 2004. People left. Offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss left. Defensive coordinator Romeo Crennel left. There were some players who left in free agency or they got older. And then Bill Belichick and Brady had to reinvent, but it took them some time to get back to where they were. And there's a chance that'll happen to Kansas City in the not too distant future. Maybe it's Andy Reid retiring. Maybe it's Travis Kelce retiring. But if you're on this ride, would you want it to stop? Wouldn't you want to keep going until you're stopped? If you have a chance at a three-peat, don't you want to go back out there? And again, they still have to win the Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers in a couple of weeks. But Kansas City feels inevitable. I have complete respect for them. You should have complete respect for them. And you should stop doubting Patrick Mahomes, the very, very, very small amount of people who actually do that. I'm going to read some comments here. Derpy Entertainment. Been watching the NFL for 20-something years. Mahomes is awesome, but it's been like this since Brady. So I don't see why it's not predictable that Mahomes wouldn't have been back. It's strange. And yeah, there were questions about the receivers going into the season. There were questions about the receivers going into last year because Tyreek Hill left. And we've seen those questions result in losses. I think Kadarius Toney drops have directly resulted in 2 Kansas City Chief losses. Or maybe it was a drop against the Lions that was picked off. And then, of course, you had Toney lining up off sides. I think there was a big drop by Marquez Valdez-Scantling as well. But then the playoffs start and everything's fine. And, I mean, there were so many people that for so many years doubted what the Patriots were capable of doing. It wasn't that long ago. I guess we're getting close to a decade, the 2014, the 2017, all those years. But it's weird that there was any doubt. Let's shift. I don't know how many people watched my podcast on, when was it? Thursday. On Thursday, though, I put together something with 100% the intention of pissing off Baltimore Ravens fans because they've been in my mention a lot for saying that I prefer CJ Stroud to Lamar Jackson. If you didn't see that, here is the edited down version of it where I put on some kind of racist looking sunglasses and a Boston Celtics Larry Bird jersey for effect. Jackson said about going up against Patrick Mahomes.
I don't like competing against him at all.
He'll never be Tom Brady. An attitude like that. Aren't you competitive, dude? What's your deal? Clearly, you're too much of a coward to follow in the footsteps of Tom Brady. That's why Bill Belichick didn't draft. That's why Mr. Kraft didn't draft you. You're soft. You're Baltimore soft. You don't want any part of competing to be the best quarterback in NFL history. You should be ashamed of yourself, Lamar. So there you go. That's Super Bowl 50. Okay, now all of a sudden it's playing something else. I need, as I've said like 300 fucking times, I need a producer or an editor. I'm so bad at doing all this stuff at once. But hey, that was the video. And if you had seen that video, you might have noticed in the comments section that there were a bunch of angry, mad Ravens fans who started yelling at me. And I feel like that might be the new brand of this show going forward. The new brand might be to just go out and troll a random, thinks way too highly of itself fan base and see what the comments are. Someone commented, he's going to beat the Chiefs to a pulp. Baltimore and soft in the same sentence is wild. I think there was somebody else who said, hey, man, it's very clear that you would say that Brock Purdy's better than Lamar Jackson. And I would never say that because I don't think Brock Purdy's very good. Brock Purdy's trying to throw interceptions the last couple of weeks. But at the same time, it is interesting to note that Brock Purdy might have been more effective with his legs than Lamar Jackson was on Sunday. So, to talk about Lamar, I think Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I do think that. No one is as multidimensional as him. Very few players are capable of the highlights that he can make when he's got the ball in his hands. 73 carries, 521 yards, 3 touchdowns in his 6-game playoff career. But as a passer, you can't deny this. It's why I got into a bit of a back and forth with DJ Bieneme. Even though I'm not someone that's on Lamar Jackson's case for his playoff struggles, his playoff numbers just aren't good. This is factual. We have a large enough sample size to call it out. 6 playoff games. And considering it just cost him in a 17-10 loss to the Chiefs on Sunday, maybe the byproduct of facing an elite defense, but definitely a factor. You got to look at it and wonder if it's going to be possible for him to do better than what he has done to this point. He's young. There's time left in his career, but he plays a style that doesn't necessarily lend itself to having a long career. His playoff completion percentage is 57.4%. Only 2 games of those 6 he's played in the playoffs, he's had a completion percentage north of 70. Keep in mind, that adds up, that low completion percentage, when you're throwing the ball, best case scenario, 25 times. He's had a couple of games where he's thrown a lot. Playoff loss to the Titans where he threw it nearly 60 times. And of course, Sunday where he threw it 37 times. And he's averaging 6.79 yards per attempt with those throws, which isn't horrible, but it's also not good. It's pedestrian. And yards per attempt, I think, are a very good way to gauge how well a quarterback is playing, how effective his throwing is. And sometimes that can be misleading based off of the yards after a catch by a receiver or something like that. But generally, it determines how far downfield you are throwing and how many yards you are getting on a given throw. 6.79, it's not bad, but it's not good. And we're talking about Lamar as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And his legs maybe make him that. As I said earlier, very few players at any position are capable of the highlights he can make when he's got the ball in his hands. The touchdown pass that he had to Zay Flowers. The throw to himself that he had. That bounced off of a defender. He catches the ball. He takes off for a first down. But the big problem and the reason that I prefer CJ Stroud to Lamar Jackson is that Jackson makes mistakes, and he makes those mistakes often. He has 6 playoff interceptions over the course of his career. 6! Including an awful one into triple coverage against Kansas City. I don't know what he saw there. No justification for it. It wasn't the end of the game. It wasn't quite a do-or-die situation, but it basically was the last gasp for Baltimore. And I know they kicked a field goal and that they may have had a chance at a touchdown drive if they could make a stop on 3rd and 9. But the defense did a lot. Drive 1 and drive 2, Kansas City moved the ball at will. From then on out, yeah, they didn't force any takeaways or anything like that, but the Ravens defense did its job. And this is one of the best defenses that we've seen in Baltimore, which is saying something. But Lamar Jackson throws 6 interceptions in the playoffs. He's fumbled 6 times, including 3 lost, which he also did on Sunday. He's been sacked 26 times in those 6 playoff games. It's a lot. Okay, his playing style, his running around, lends itself to more, but, I mean, we're talking 4+ sacks a game. 4.33, I think, if I'm doing my math correctly off the top of my head. And those mistakes are things that we have not seen from CJ Stroud in 2 playoff games. Very limited sample size, but is this past regular season also a pretty effective sample size to determine what kind of player CJ Stroud is? He's not cautious or conservative. He'll throw the football down the field, but he does not make big risks. He cut down the sack numbers as the season progressed. He doesn't put the ball on the ground when he gets sacked often. And he doesn't throw interceptions. He threw no interceptions in the playoffs this year. No sacks in the playoffs, which I was shocked by. I thought for sure he got sacked at least once. Maybe it got called back by a penalty or something like that. But this is a guy who, as a rookie in playoff games, was not making mistakes. And I know there's an argument that any quarterback can go through a whole career without making mistakes because they weren't ever doing anything that was capable of turning into a big play. Lots of game manager quarterbacks, Marcus Mariotas, guys who are uncomfortable throwing the football down the field. But Stroud isn't that guy. Stroud doesn't turn the football over. And I think it's totally fair right now to say that you prefer CJ Stroud to Lamar Jackson. If you disagree, that's totally fine. I'm not telling you have to agree with me here. But the amount of people that were pissed off about why I would take CJ Stroud over Lamar Jackson when not only does Stroud make less mistakes, but he's on a rookie contract and he plays a style that does not lend itself to serious injuries or deterioration of ability, because let's just be honest, you get older as a runner, you're not going to be as good the older you get. You'll be a little bit slower. You might be a little more contact averse. You might not be as slippery, as agile. But I think it's fair to say that you like CJ Stroud now, not just because of the rookie deal and because his playing style lends itself to a longer career, but also because he's just better when it comes to not making mistakes. And we've seen enough from Lamar Jackson to this point in his career where it's clear that that is a part of his playoff resume. It can change, sure. But do you expect it to change if he's going up against Lamar Jackson more? Or excuse me, against Patrick Mahomes more in the Chiefs? Do you expect it to change if he's going up against the very many quarterbacks in the AFC who are great? He's going to find himself in situations where he has to do more than what he has done. And in this game on Sunday, you can blame it on the game plan. You can blame it on another offensive coordinator. You can blame it on his receivers. You can blame it on Zay Flowers not holding on to the football when he dove into the end zone. Whoever you're blaming it on, Lamar Jackson did not do enough on Sunday and made two mistakes that cost his team the game. That's all we're trying to say here. And yeah, I take CJ Stroud over Lamar Jackson. More comments. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Twitch.tv/Gallant says, Belichick and Brady, Reed and Mahomes, and the next will be D'Amico and Stroud, says Johnny Lambert. You got to have the head coach quarterback combo. We are at the doorstep, Texans. You're making a prediction in an AFC with Patrick Mahomes. Good luck being Belichick and Brady. Anyone. I don't care how good you are. Derpy Entertainment says, Brady was America's Boy Scout. Now Mahomes is the golden boy of the world. NFL got their face to the league. But the difference was that the Patriots and Tom Brady were not well liked by everybody. More the villains, I think, when it comes to Brady. Are the Chiefs villains because of their association with Taylor Swift? I guess you could make that argument. Mahomes does seem to have a lot of appeal. Some people are annoyed by his wife. Others find his younger brother to be a piece of shit. And that's totally fair. But it does feel like, yeah, he's the face of the league. Derpy also says, I think Lamar is a running back, but I believe Derpy has also said that he is a Steelers fan earlier in this chat. Frontrunner comments, the Lions wide receiver didn't do a good job, and the coach made questionable play calls. Talking about Dan Campbell. Talk about things screwing up and losing games. Yeah, you could argue that Dan Campbell and going for it on fourth down a couple of times is the reason they lost, but to me it's more about drops and just a shit ton of errors by the Lions down the stretch. I mean, they had an interception bounced off a guy's head, and it turns into a 50-yard reception for Brandon Ayuk. Edward Leal comments, CJ did better than Lamar in the playoffs. Lamar just had more weapons. I don't know. I don't know if the Lamar has more weapons necessarily. You know, do you really want to throw to Nelson Aguilar? We didn't see a whole lot of Mark Andrews in this game. Zay Flowers and Nico Collins, I think that evens itself out. I suppose the receivers after Zay Flowers, you could argue Odell Beckham Jr. is still a capable player. He's definitely not the guy that he used to be. That's for sure. Someone named Bumper Bogey T is spamming me. Go fuck yourself. All right. I want to talk about this because there's been a lot of coverage of it recently, and when I see stuff like this, I feel the need to actually weigh in on it myself. I don't think I need to tell you what a disaster the United States and Mexico border is right now. It's one of many humanitarian crises we have in the United States. Opioids, the homeless, fentanyl, might be related to fentanyl. It's overloaded. I'm sure you have seen something, whether it's pictures or numbers, that show that something should be done. What is that something? I gotta be honest, I don't fucking know. I don't. I wish I had the answer. I'm just a simple sports talk show host. But I've seen enough of this where I feel the need to, at the very least, try to sift through what's in front of us and make some sense, because there's some people that are very angry with the way that Texas is handling the border. Even though at the border we're seeing 10,000 crossing a day in December, multiply that by 366 since it's a leap year, that's 3.66 million in a country with a population of 335,893,000. More data. There's been over 250,000 notices to appear issued since December. For those who don't know, that's an official document that starts deportation proceedings against a foreign national. If you want to see a chart, this is the chart. As you can see, December of this year and the last couple of years have seen a rather dramatic surge. And to make matters worse, NTAs, 264,542 last month alone. There's also a backlog of like 3 million of these. So when people cross the border illegally, it takes a really long time to just figure out whether or not they're going to send this person back. That obviously puts a strain on logistics. And also, it's just horrible for the poor migrants, the majority of whom I'm sure are just desperate to survive by any means necessary. I mean, some of these people are being used as props, sent by bus or plane to sanctuary cities. We're talking like 100,000 people. Jesus. So, whatever is or isn't being done about it at a federal level clearly isn't working, clearly isn't helping. And now, on top of all of this, we have a federal versus state dick measuring contest between the Joe Biden administration and Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Who's right? I suppose that's up to everybody watching or listening right now. Here's all I know. The Department of Justice threatened to sue Texas if it allowed state authorities to arrest and prosecute illegal immigrants. The Department of Justice also filed suit against Texas over a floating barrier in the Rio Grande River, which is the border between Texas and Mexico, Arizona as well, New Mexico as well. The Department of Homeland Security also is in a battle with Texas in Shelby Park, which is in Eagle Pass. Texas put up razor wire around this specific portion of land, hoping to discourage illegal entries there. And since the Department of Homeland Security is fighting to get access to this area because they're saying its personnel are unable to reach migrants in need of emergency care, which I'm not sure I necessarily believe that. I want to believe that. Since the Department of Homeland Security wanted that access, though, there was a decision that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 ruling, said that the U.S. Border Patrol agents can cut through this razor wire to access the area if they want. So Greg Abbott isn't having this. And basically, he's just told the Supreme Court, in a way, fuck off. They've put additional razor wire in the area. And then last Wednesday, they released this statement. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has instructed his agencies to ignore federal statutes that mandate the detention of illegal immigrants. The failure of the Biden administration to fulfill the duties imposed by Article 4, Section 4 of, or I guess Clause 4 of the Constitution, which says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive against domestic violence. It's also triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, per Abbott, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships in war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Blah, 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 right? Abbott's statement continues saying, all of these things reserves to Texas the right of self-defense. For these reasons, I have already declared an invasion under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. And 25 Republican governors signed off with him on that, saying President Biden and his administration have left Americans in our country completely vulnerable to unprecedented illegal immigration pouring across the southern border. Instead of upholding the rule of law and securing the border, the Biden administration has attacked and sued Texas for stepping up to protect American citizens from historic levels of illegal immigrants, deadly drugs like fentanyl, and terrorists entering our country. We stand in solidarity with our fellow Governor Greg Abbott and the state of Texas and utilizing every tool and strategy, including razor wire fences, to secure the border. And we do it in part because the Biden administration is refusing to enforce immigration laws already on the books, blah, 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 blah. So it's a dick measuring contest right now. It's a dick measuring contest in a situation that is bad. And generally, dick measuring contests do not lead to cooperation, which is, I think, what everybody involved should want in some way, shape, or form. So that's all I'm asking for. Victor B asks, and why are you talking about this? Because I live in Texas. And because I'm tired of seeing people from outside of Texas weigh in on this thing. No, I don't live at the border. I don't see this shit with my own eyes. But I see pictures, I see videos. And I feel like we all at the very least gotta say, hey, can we do something? And it's interesting when you see people telling us as a country or as a state, when they're not living there, when they're outside of it, telling us how to keep our home. I hate hearing it from Canadians and Europeans telling us how to run our country. You don't understand this place. You just don't. It's not your fault, but don't tell us what we need to do, acting like you know how this whole thing works. Don't advise us on things you have no clue about. But when people weigh in on it who should have a clue about it, that's where I get a little pissy. Enter this column from a publication located 3.5 hours north of the border, the Los Angeles Times. Erwin Chemerinsky is a contributing writer to a media entity called Opinion and the dean of the UC Berkeley School of Law, and wrote an article criticizing Texas basically ignoring the Supreme Court. Writing, quote, "This is frightening and just wrong as a matter of law. To begin with, Article 6 of the Constitution makes the federal government supreme when it is acting within its authority." We're going to get into words. I think it is highly debatable that the government is acting on anything. They're not doing anything about it. Continuing this article by Erwin Chemerinsky. Deeming any contrary state policies preempted. The Supreme Court has long held that the federal government has broad powers over immigration and the borders. Well, does anything hold broad powers over anyone or anything when there's 265 deportation notice to appears over the course of 1 month, or a backlog of 3 million that haven't been taken care of? No, it just can't. You can't have power over something when you're hopelessly behind schedule on it. Could more resources be put towards taking care of this? Sure, it could. Will it? I don't know. Given the dragging of feet over the past calendar year by the Biden administration. That's when Biden first saw this thing firsthand. Maybe he had other priorities the first 2 years in office, but there's been a year to do something about this, and everything is moving so damn slowly, except for the amount of people that are illegally crossing the border, which in December at times reached over 10,000 people a day. Continues this column. Abbott's calling immigration an invasion doesn't change anything. It does. That's accurate terminology. There's a couple of definitions for the word invasion. An instance of invading a country or a region with an armed force, like the Allied invasion of Normandy. That's not what's happening here. But an incursion by a large number of people or things into a place or a sphere of activity. Example used here, stadium guards are preparing for another invasion of fans. Or an unwelcome intrusion into another's domain. Random drug testing of employees is an unwarranted invasion of privacy, which is the example used here. It's an unwelcome intrusion. They're illegal aliens. Do we want to help them out? Do we want to be kind, empathetic? I think most of us do. These people are trying to do whatever they can to survive or to help their family live a better life. Who can hate them for that? Are there bad apples? I guess. There's bad apples everywhere. But when 10,000 people are crossing a day, and that's just the ones that are being processed, don't you have to call it that? I'll explain why you have to in just a moment. I'm going to continue reading this column, though. The supremacy of federal law and the federal government doesn't cease even if there is an invasion. I would say the Roman Empire begs to differ. Because can you have supremacy over something you supposedly control if you can't control the border? I mentioned the Roman Empire because in a different way, this happened back during the 300s to technically the 800s, with the fall of Rome along the way. The migration period, also known as the barbarian invasions, was a period of European history marked by large-scale migrations that saw the fall of the Western Roman Empire and subsequent settlements of its former kingdoms by various tribes and the establishment of the post-Roman kingdoms. War bands or tribes of 10,000 to 20,000 people. Over the course of 100 years, the migrants numbered not more than 750,000 in total, compared to an average 40 million population of the Roman Empire at the time. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. You can call it migration because that's probably more politically correct, but you can also call it an invasion. And when stuff like this happens and resources are strained, doing nothing accomplishes nothing. So trying to stop it, which is what Greg Abbott is doing, I do think it's the right call because the federal government's doing nothing about it. And you can agree or disagree with Greg Abbott on a lot of different things. I'm just pointing at this specific incident right here. If the federal government's doing nothing, then someone's got to do something, especially when it seems like the federal government not doing anything is just making the problem worse and worse and worse. This is something that has to be figured out now. So this article continues, and it brings up the provision in the Constitution that Greg Abbott cited as a reason to declare this a state of invasion, saying this: no state shall engage in war unless actually invaded. The provision was meant to allow states to respond to enemy troops at a time when the federal government could be slow to respond because of the nature of communications and transportation. But what if they're slow to respond in an era with better communication and better transportation? Or what if they take 2 years after taking office to visit El Paso and even get a figure on what the hell's going on down here with your own eyeballs? The pandemic. All sorts of shit have happened over the last couple of years. I get that. But you're trying to make an argument here, this columnist in the LA Times, that it's not actually an invasion. We're only calling it an invasion because in the 1700s, the Constitution was written during a time where communication was slow and transportation was slow. Okay, well, those aren't excuses anymore, and it's happening still. This article continues. Nothing in the clause, writes this columnist, implies that the state may violate federal law or impede the federal government. Well, actually, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution was supposed to clarify that the federal government is limited. So what if the government oversteps? You can't even try? You may as well try. Nor does a power, continues the columnist, nor does the state have the power to disregard or disobey a U.S. Supreme Court order. But that is what Abbott is doing in directing the Texas National Guard to prevent federal agents from taking down the razor wire. And it is distressing to see Republican governors openly cheering his lawlessness. I doubt you're distressed. I doubt you are distressed. I think you were looking for something to write about, for a column, and this is what you chose. You're a lawyer. You're making some arguments here. Okay, cool, great. But do you think something massive is going to happen next as a result of this? I think this is in everybody's best interest to slow this thing down. And the last thing that this guy brings up in this column, this is, of course, not the first time a state tried to disregard federal law. In the 1950s, Southern governors attempted to block the court-ordered desegregation of schools. Okay. You're going to bring up that example. Maybe that is the only example of the Supreme Court being ignored. But it's convenient to make it seem like the only time that the state government has pushed back against the Supreme Court was due to racism, even if that's not the official label on it, in Arkansas, in Brown versus the Board of Education. It's very convenient. It's a nice way to wrap up your argument, that's for sure. oh, it's consistent with today because this is a policy of racism, but it's not. It's a fucking mess, and someone's got to do something about it. The federal government isn't doing anything about it. So thank you for listening to my spiel. I understand why some people maybe don't want me to talk about stuff like this, but we're in the football offseason, baby, and we're going to be doing more stuff like this. You don't like it? Hey, we're going to try to do it in a fair way every single time we bring it up. Lenny Beeson says, stop the cap, exclamation point, with laughing. Is that about Lamar Jackson versus CJ Stroud, or is that about anything else that I just laid out? I'm curious. Let's wrap it up with one last thing. So, I was in Austin this past weekend for my friend's 40th birthday party. We had a good time. On Friday, we went to a bar that was not my first choice to go to, but hey, we went. It's a bar that is LGBTQ friendly. And you wouldn't really know it on the outside, but you get inside and, hey, it's a bar. They had some nice drinks. So I have a couple of drinks over the course of the night. And after a while, I got to go to the bathroom. So I walk up to where there are two doors for bathrooms. One of them is open to the left. It has a urinal in it, though the urinal's all artsy-fartsy. It's been painted to look like lips. And just a regular toilet. There's no stall, but the door's open. No one's going in it. I assume it's the men's room because of the urinal. Whoops! As soon as I step in there and go and walk out, I start getting yelled at, reprimanded by a bunch of women. As this is all happening, I'm just thinking to myself, well, no one went into the bathroom, and I don't really know anything other than this looked like it was a men's room. So I just walk out, minding my own business. I don't say a word. Sit down with my friends. All of a sudden, four of these women come over to me, and they basically just start saying, like, I can't believe you did this. Did what? And they had a tough time saying what it actually was that I did. Because I guess, per them, there was a line. But I didn't see a line. The line seemed to be going to the bathroom to the right. And I think we all know that women take a little bit longer to go to the bathroom than men. I think that the official numbers that I saw in a study takes 90 seconds for a woman to go to the bathroom, takes 40 seconds for a man. There's various reasons for that. Removing clothes, sitting down, feminine products, etc. And 59% of women said that they regularly have to wait in line when they go to the bathroom. So, I mean, I just assumed. And maybe I shouldn't have assumed. Maybe I should have, going into this bar, thought to myself, oh, okay, well, this might be a gender-neutral bathroom. But that's eventually the point that they made to me. If they had been polite, I probably would have apologized. But they were really getting into my face and acting like I was a bad person for it. And then one of them made up that I called her a bitch. No, I didn't. I minded my own business. Eventually, because of the amount of pressure on me from these four women, my friends encouraged me that I should leave. So I walk out the door, and once I'm out the door, I started ranting to them about how fucking stupid it was and how crazy I thought they were for not taking my side in this situation. And I'm still a little bit mad about it. Should I be? No, I should move on. I shouldn't care, and I probably shouldn't have yelled about it after I left the way that I did. But I guess Austin's just going to Austin. I, though, think that place, at the very least, needs a better sign on the restrooms. Maybe one that says gender neutral. Or maybe a gender neutral bathroom that has stalls for everybody, as opposed to just like two toilets in there that make it seem like it's a men's room. Just a thought. But yeah, I got kicked out of a bar in Austin because I used a gender neutral bathroom that had a urinal in it. So there you go. All right, guys. Hey, you comments. Yo, make a video on on what you think the new Texans jersey should look like. Nah, I don't want to. I don't want to do that. That would involve art. I hope it looks good. It's probably going to involve light blue. That's all I know. So, nah. But appreciate the request. Gallant says at gmail.com. If you ever have a question, live at youtube.com/PaulGallant, twitch.tv/GallantSays, on Twitter @GallantSays, Instagram @SportsGallant, and Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports Monday and Thursday nights, and occasionally after major Houston sporting events. It's also available wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. If you are watching this thing on YouTube, please like, please subscribe. If you are listening to this, Apple and Spotify specifically, please subscribe. Leave a review. Leave a rating. Every little bit helps. I am merely Paul Gallant. Thank you for stopping by. So long, farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful Monday night. I'll be back at it with a pre-recorded episode